you see me?
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Please.
Professor Dana Redford, he comes from Portugal, from PEEP platform, so Policy Experimentation Evaluation Platform. He's a PhD and a founder of this platform, and he is also this platform supports.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
He's also a senior fellow at the Institute of European Studies and also collaborates with the University. And his topic today is the challenge of the changing face of digital education and appraisal didactics and challenge-based learning. Dr. Redford on the screen is yours.
Yes, I can. I can hear you.
Can you please start with your presentation?
It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry not to be there in the room with you. I would like to start by sharing my presentation with you. It seems that perfect. It seems that let's see, I can now put this up for you. Today, as was mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the challenges that digital education and how we can look in using challenge-based learning and entrepreneurship in looking at developing digital learning. And as was mentioned, I'm the president of the Policy Experimentation and Evaluation Platform, which is an accredited NGO for development in Portugal. We look at evidence-based public policy in research and education and support the twin transitions of the green and digital future. We have done quite a few different projects looking at very much developing skills and in education, looking at research and innovation, as well as looking at local and regional development. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but much of our work...
Mr. Redford, excuse me, for the people that are live here, there's a small technical difficulty with the sound. We cannot hear you. The stream can hear you just fine, but just wait a couple of minutes so we can hear you in the room.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Tell me when to start.
I will. Zgłaszała kamerę, chociaż. Czy zwyczaj video settings. A ty nie zwykle klop drugą kamerę. Same tu dwie kamery każe. Mogę tylko na tak, Čakaj, sem vam.
Evo ga. Jaz ti bom dal pa moj kom, da bo šlo še noter, evo. A se slišimo?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes, now I can hear you.
Yeah. Applause. Do you hear that?
Yes, I hear all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so again, welcome, Dr. Redford, and the screen is yours, please.
Great. Well, once again, I'm so sorry not to be there. I love Slovenia and your lovely capital. And I'm very excited to be discussing with you today this important topic, looking at the changing face of digital education and looking how we can use entrepreneurial didactics and challenge-based learning to really support this dual transition, which is one of the things that our NGO has been working on. So the Policy Experimentation Evaluation Platform, which I'm president, is based in Lisbon, Portugal, as you had mentioned. It's an NGO for development, meaning we work both in the European panorama as well as in Africa and the Middle East. And we support evidence-based public policy making and looking at research, education, and innovation. So today I'll be speaking with you a lot about skills and competencies. These are some of the aspects which we support. And we look at research and innovation as well as ecosystems. Some of the other projects that we're involved with is supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystems in Africa. And indeed, I will be transported live to Portuguese-speaking Africa in about 2.5 hours to present with them about entrepreneurship education, supporting those aspects. We also look at local and regional development, which is a key factor for looking at ecosystems and looking how we can be most relevant to our communities. So our experience really lies in different fields. So we look at supporting these EU development funds and looking at the innovation transition. The main thing that I wanted to talk about with you today is this aspect of key competencies. So the competency frameworks that we look at are really a point of departure. So you can see that the council has recommended that the key competencies be looked at from different angles. Of course, one of them being digital competencies, but also those that support STEM, language, general literacy, cultural awareness and expression, entrepreneurship, civic education, and of course, personal and social learning. So this sort of panorama of competency frameworks and how we can look at key competencies really have guided the development in the past 5 years in the European Commission, and I think gives a good point of departure for what we need to do to innovate in digital education. So to talk about some of these competency frameworks, one of them being the Life Comp, that is this tree here that you can see. And Life Comp has various aspects to it. So life competencies looking at self-regulation, flexibility, well-being, but also aspects that also border on entrepreneurship competencies, empathy, communication, collaboration, this idea of a growth mindset and critical thinking, managing learning. And so we can see how, in terms of the competency frameworks, they overlap one another. And so if we're going to innovate, we need to be focused on how we can innovate from these overlapping positions. So in the wheel here, the flower, you can see EntreComp. EntreComp is the Entrepreneurial Competency Framework, which is something that I helped develop with the Joint Research Center in Seville, that looks at these competency frameworks and has been developing them at the request of the European Parliament. So if we look at entrepreneurship competencies, of course, entrepreneurship is defined as, can be defined several ways, but in European panorama, it is putting ideas into action. If we look at the panorama of the United States, the Harvard working definition on entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond the resources we currently control. And if you think about both these definitions, they look at resources, they look at action, they look at both a mindset and a skill set. And that really is what we think about when we talk about both digital and entrepreneurial competencies, as well as life competencies. We want people that are open, that are ready to work on putting ideas into action, searching out opportunities, and marshaling and using resources in the best way. And of course, we know that resources themselves are embedded in the resources are embedded in networks that we have. So you have this social aspect, which is why these competency frameworks really work so well together, and there are so many overlaps. So now I wanted to just turn the point here of talking about this point of departure, and to say that competency frameworks are also meant to have a sort of progression to them. So the first one is awareness, the awareness of, let's say, entrepreneurship as a possible career choice, or if you look at digital competencies, understanding to protect one's data, to understand the sort of competencies of working in a digital world. So we go from awareness to exploration, to integration, expertise, looking at leadership and innovation. So this progression as we go through our academic lives, as well as our lives in work, this can be a transition that we go through. And you can see here the curiosity moves to meaningful use, moves to strategy, moves to reflection, and moves to critical thinking and renewal and innovation. So these are the sort of ways in which these competency frameworks can be used. Of course, if we look at the digital transformation, we really have what all of us have gone through and what we are currently going through, and the COVID-19 pandemic having really done more for digital transition than any type of European project or policy could ever do. So now we understand the boundaries and can push digital competencies forward. So we look at this as being opportunities. So how can this be done? So let me give you a few examples of some programs that I've worked on that integrate digital competencies and other competencies. So there are two possible approaches to digital competencies. One is embedding digital competencies into all learning outcomes. So that is, if you're going to develop what learners should be learning, you have little hints about how digital competencies are important. The other way is to have digital competencies that are very explicit and listed as specific competencies, which can be developed. So both of these have both positive and negative ways of contributing to education and the renewal of education that we see coming in as part of the Slovenian presidency. So if we look at how to develop competencies and look at developing learning outcomes, so that's explicit written statements about what a program should help us achieve. Usually we talk about digital competencies as a list of competencies that can be explicitly focused on and tested. So the advantage of embedding is that it goes across everything. However, if you're going to try to evaluate that, which is one of the key things which our NGO does, and what I think is also key for those of you who are trying to push the boundaries and to develop education in new ways. The other way is a more explicit one, so that you have a very specific type of competency that you want to make sure, and learning outcome that is focused on digital competencies. So in this regard, there's an excellent program which is called the Young Innovators Program. This is a program by the EIT Climate Kick. The EIT, for those of you who don't know it, is the European Institute for Innovation and Technology. The EIT has specific knowledge innovation communities, thus the KIC at the end of the Climate Kick name. So this knowledge innovation community dedicates purely to climate change and to helping that transition. And they have a program for young people called the Young Innovators Program. So we developed a list of learning outcomes. You can see these actually on the Young Innovators website, which I've put here. And this is my first example of how we can take these are challenge-based learning. So if I describe the program for you in a nutshell, it has different components, one being taught in class, another which is a young climathon. So these are events where you take a challenge, usually from the local community. So that can be from a municipality or a local company. And the idea here is that these young people are trying to develop climate change solutions for these companies or for their local municipality. And this is a challenge that is both embedded in class time and then relates specifically to the Young Climathon, which is an event, usually a one-day event, where there's an intense focus on trying to come up with specific actions. So in this regard, we want to make sure that there are learning outcomes specifically that look at both entrepreneurial competencies, because the Young Innovators Program works with entrepreneurship, it works with climate change. So it's an innovation type of program. And also specifically, we want to test that digital literacy and the use of digital tools, as well as forms of gaining information and knowledge, is part of what these people are going to be able to achieve. Young people are going to be able to do once they partake in this program. So an interesting program, the Young Innovators Program. So if you don't know it, I suggest you do. And there is, in fact, in Slovenia, a group of people that are working on the Young Innovators Program. So you can also get involved. The other thing that I would like to say about competencies and about developing new programs and innovation is that the European Commission, in terms of their policy guidance, said in 2014 that every young person should have a real world experience through problem-based learning, challenge-based learning, and that this should be embedded across curriculums. So this is one of the challenges that I personally also took on for myself, and I'll explain a little bit about what program we did to develop this, and also something that we did with Slovenia. So young people should benefit from at least one practical entrepreneurial experience before they leave compulsory education. So this means that it doesn't have to be a class in entrepreneurship. It can be a challenge. It can be some idea plan competition or some other type of non-formal or informal education. And the idea here is that entrepreneurship education should be embedded as a horizontal approach for a whole program, and that we should also support the key competencies of teachers. So in the approach of the Young Innovators program, we actually started with the learning outcomes for educators first. And this is something that then can get translated into the learning outcomes of the young people. So if we look at a specific program that I was the international coordinator of, where, as you can see, we had the Slovenian Ministry of Education and Sports, as well as the Ministry of Education in Austria, as well as the Ministry of Education in Luxembourg and in Portugal, where I'm located. And this was about experiential entrepreneurship education that is embedded in the existing curriculum. So this is about youth entrepreneurship and promoting these key competencies and employability. And you can see the project at youstartproject.eu, but most importantly, you can see if you go to youthstart.eu, you can see the challenges, which are translated and in Slovenian, as well as in German, French, English, Portuguese, and you can have these, and I think now it's translated into French and also into Spanish. But you have these all in the Slovenian language, as well as these other European languages that you can take, and you can use these challenge-based learning tactics. So let me give you an example. We even worked in primary education. So to try to innovate in primary education, for example, one of the challenges that I like most is the trash value challenge. So here you take young people, try to go to the trash, try to find the recycling, and you upcycle. So the idea here is that you are going to take, let's say, something that you find that's not being used around your school area or even in your classroom, and try to build something, make something that could be a toy, can be an experiment, and you try to create something that is of value from something that is ostensibly trash. And this teaches lessons of value creation. It teaches lessons of innovation. It teaches lessons of recycling, and so of environmental stewardship. So a challenge that you have, something simple like this, can go across different types of learning outcomes. And I think that this is a way of really innovating. And the way we do this in the Youth Start program is actually we have educators from different areas of education. So we don't have someone who's teaching an entrepreneurship class. We have foreign language teachers. We have sports and physical education teachers. We have science teachers, history teachers. They can teach a given challenge, and it can be taught from one subject, or it can be taught across subjects. And I think that this is also a way of innovating in terms of challenge-based education. So this is to, again, focus on what were the priorities of the ministries which we were supporting: experiential entrepreneurship education, to go out and do, entrepreneurial thinking, to have this part of the mindset across different fields, and try to gain inspiration from entrepreneurs, and not just focus, say, on business students or economic students. Really, again, this integrated easily into science classes, into foreign language classes, very definitely foreign language classes, because we had the challenges and we have the challenges in different languages. So it can be a very nice way of exploring culture. It can be a nice way of exploring different words and meanings, history, sports, etc. So really, it's about the learning program. There you have the website, youthstart.eu, and you can find all of the challenges, again, in different languages. So in terms of finally, just a few guiding words about using competency frameworks. So why use these? How can we support innovation from these competency frameworks, and why are they interesting? Well, the first thing is you can do a mapping exercise. If you know the competencies that you want to develop and the learning outcomes, you can then identify potential gaps in learning pathways. You can help facilitate peer learning and describe the outcomes across contexts. And you can identify competencies that should be used and develop assessment tools. One of the things about the Youth Start Entrepreneurial Challenges project is we did what's called random control trials. You probably know this from medicine and from pharmacy, pharmacological solutions. That is to have a treatment, so a drug for the case of pharmacy. In this case, it's an educational program. We have those who take the educational program and those who are part of the control group, what would be a placebo in the pharmacy industry. So through understanding what are the differences between the group that has had the educational program and the group that has not had anything and has continued with their path, you can see the differences. And in that way, we also use random control. We randomize who gets the program. So the idea here is you really have a range of students that should be somewhat identical that have been taken at random to be placed in the group that is getting the treatment or the group that is the control group. And the idea here is that one thing that a framework is not, which I want to emphasize, is it doesn't substitute a curriculum. A curriculum is really a plan on how things progress and develop. It can be very prescriptive on what's going on in each day. So it is not prescriptive in terms of programming content. So this is how I see the use of competency frameworks. So with that, I will now pause and we can take some questions and we can have a discussion. Here's my email. Again, I'm so sorry not to be there today, but I'm very honored to be with you, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. So I'll stop there and look forward to speaking with you.
For your presentation, very interesting presentation. Also raising some questions that are important in general for educational competencies, not only entrepreneurship education. But before I ask you questions, maybe questions from the public here in our room. Okay, students are the first one.
Great.
Okay, so my question for you is, what kind of mindset do you think students should acquire with integrating entrepreneurship into educational system?
Well, that's a great question. I think the mindset aspect is really key. You want young people who are open to new ideas. You want also young people who are looking at finding solutions. These aspects are really key to entrepreneurship. In terms of the mindset, it's also a question of seeking out solutions. It's a question of understanding that we need to reach out to others. So entrepreneurship is really the mindset of entrepreneurship is really that one of growth and one of exploration. So and I also want to emphasize, which I think your question alludes to, entrepreneurship is not just about starting companies. We definitely don't think of entrepreneurship as company creation. Entrepreneurship is something that is much broader. It's a competency for life. And that can translate into learning. It can translate into working for someone else. It doesn't have to be something, it can be working for the government. It can be working in a school. We talk about entrepreneurial schools, changing that. So really entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship mindset is a wide one. Thank you for the question.
Okay, are you satisfied with your answer? Okay, thank you. One more question.
Hello, my name is Lucia Gregurkova. I'm from the Ministry of Education from the Czech Republic. And I was very interested in the approaches you described. You mentioned that there are two approaches to digital skills. First, to embed it into the learning outcomes, and then to set digital key competence. It's very actual for us, or very current for us, as we recently introduced a reform of the curricula for elementary school and grammar schools. and we introduced new digital key competence. However, in the future, we are planning to embed these digital competence or digital skills into concrete learning outcomes. I would like to ask you whether you could elaborate more on the pros and cons of these approaches, and whether do you see any room for combination of these approaches? Thank you.
So again, this is a great challenge that you've alluded to here, and I think it sounds like you're taking a wise approach, because first we want to focus on things explicitly, and so if we can have a learning outcome which is specific on digital competencies, then we can. So the main advantage of having something very explicit and more narrowly focused on a specific, so digital education being a learning outcome which is vertical instead of horizontal, is that we can test this. So the biggest worry about doing something that's embedded is then that you cannot test it properly. And so we also have these sort of challenges when we do these policy experimentation projects. So as I described the look of a treatment, of an educational treatment and an educational control group, the question of are you sure that this is the hardest thing to try to test? Are you sure that it was the educational treatment that actually made the difference? And the way in which we make sure that these are happening is we try to make sure that the other experiences, the other educational experiences, are similar in both the treatment group and the control group. But getting back to your question, I think when we're introducing something new, I think it's very important that it is vertical, that it's very specific, and that it can be tested. And then once this has been introduced, then I think we can go to the horizontal approach and make sure it's embedded across different subject areas. And again, embedding it across different subject areas has a really important advantage, and that is that it will then change how we teach, not just what we're teaching. And I think that is the key eventually on making digital skills really a key change maker for young people. But as I explained in the Young Innovators program, we had a big debate on how we were going to develop this, and finally came to the approach that the narrower, because we were talking about climate change across and entrepreneurial competencies, we wanted to make sure that we were able to test them. So we made them more explicit. So I think it sounds like in the Czech Republic, you're doing the right thing in first going vertical and then going horizontal as it becomes more customary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the exact questions that I wanted to ask Professor Redford. Because it's important for us that in dealing with teaching, and how to teach and evaluate competencies, how to integrate them. So maybe just one more short questions for Professor Redford, and then we continue with our presentations. Is there any questions? Are there any? Aha, two. Okay, lady was first. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Dana, for the presentation. Jude Cosgrove from Research Centre in Ireland. You mentioned assessment there, and this is something that I think is probably a key challenge across the EU. How to reform assessment so that it may help to drive the innovation, the cross-curricular thinking, the creativity, the open-mindedness that I think we're all seeking. Do you have any thoughts on this issue from your work?
Yes. So the question of assessment and the way in which we have gone about this in this 3.5-year, €2.6 million project on entrepreneurial competencies and entrepreneurship education was the way in which we followed the students were through questionnaires, through a self-assessment, so a pre and a post test, and we even did a mid test in the middle of the semester. These questionnaires can be quite long, So we were doing a very specific policy experimentation project with these random control trials. But let's say for the more average teacher or someone who really just wants to understand their school, what is the impact that their teaching and their specific project or what they're trying to accomplish is actually being accomplished. In that regard, we can take more simple questions. We can look at, let's start with the previous question. We can also talk about mindsets and skill sets. So if we can identify what are the key things that we want in terms of the change of mindset from the educational experience, or the skills that we want, and make those explicit. We can formulate questions. We can also, there's a lot of great questions that have been already developed in entrepreneurial learning, in digital learning. So we take these questionnaires that have already been statistically validated, and we can do it before and we can do it after. And then what we did, since we had this longer period, is we tested also 2 years afterwards to see how people's how these young people's mindsets and skill sets had changed, these competencies had changed. So really, I think this approach of a pre and post is probably one of the key ways in which, and in terms of evaluation, what I would recommend is trying to find questionnaires that have been already statistically validated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you also for this answer. We will now continue with our presentations, Professor Redford. So I don't know if you will stay in virtually in Confiva platform. Yes. Anyway, thank you for your interesting presentation and have a nice day.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Now I will invite Peter Krebel and Meta Jurca-Sinkovic to prepare to their presentation. While they do that, I will just mention that I forget at the start to introduce students for secondary schools. They will introduce themselves later, but they are also here with us in our sessions and, as you can see, actively collaborating. So welcome to the session. Okay, the floor is yours then.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you here on this special occasion. My name is Peter Krebel, and here with me is Meta Jurca-Sinkovic. We are both from the Secondary School of Technical Profession Šiška here in Ljubljana. At our school, we are education students for 3 programs: mechatronics, computer science, and electronics. So, how everything started? At the beginning, you're probably wondering how it all began. During the pandemic, we were noticed that the distance learning was not ideal for our students, mostly for all the students, not just our students. They were not as motivated as they used to be. They were searching for new challenges. Also, the teacher noticed that the students were changing, and that was something we have to think about. We started thinking about the change. What can be changed? How can we increase the motivation, their motivation? And of course, how to encourage students to start thinking and cooperating with each other in solving some interesting challenges. We wanted the students to be curious again and show what they are capable of.
Okay, let's start with the idea. That is how the idea was born. We decided to get in touch with the companies that we already cooperate with on regular basis. For example, when it comes to the practical education of the students in companies, or working on various other projects, and ask them to offer the students some real-life problems from the industry. The students would then try to solve the problems with their own knowledge and skills and present their solutions to the companies. We saw an opportunity to motivate the students through different real-life problems and to motivate them to think about the problems, try to solve them, and maybe find career opportunity along the way. Of course, we were aware that our teachers would have to cooperate in the project as well, namely as mentors, guiding the students, coordinating their work, and spending time with the students virtually through Zoom and other online tools, since the current epidemic situation was not on our side and the students were not allowed to come to school. The mentors would also help the student with the use of different technologies for problem solving and, of course, with time management and other things as well.
Along with the help of our school mentors, the students were also offered help from the company mentors. Their primary role was to communicate and to explain what exactly is the problem. How to solve the problem was on the student side. And all the details about the particular problem, of course, because they've received the problem, they didn't have all the view in the company, so how the problem is integrated and what there is the final result they should produce. The mentors were there to help them, to explain them. The whole project was then finally brought to the life with the help of the event organizer. You can see the logo Mediade. And of course, 7 companies that were cooperating with us on this project. LEK, Danfoss, AMZS, Lahko Union, Ljubljanske mlekarne, LTK Castings, and INRBT. Those were the companies who are cooperating and give the students the real problems. When we are talking about digital skills, the tools, the students as well as the teachers were using different tools. Here you can see only some of them. Of course, the list is not the full list, just the basic one. During the whole process, there were many other tools that were used, such as programs for simulations, visualization, video editing, picture editing, drawing diagrams, and other things as well. The crucial element of the entire process was the fact that everybody involved in the project was familiar with all the necessary tools to get the work done. After all, we are technical school, aren't we? And when we are talking about challenge areas, as I mentioned before, students were given real life problems, not just situation from the school, something that the teacher say, let's do this, this is the problem and solve it. These were real problems from the companies. They were divided into 3 main challenge areas: human resources, technological challenges, and advertising. Why those 3 areas? Human resources and advertising are important for the students since they are at an age when they're trying to find their work opportunities, to find their first jobs. Technological challenges, on the other hand, are just made sense because since we are technical school, we are educating them for this field. So mechatronics, electricians, and computer science. It was logical that students gain a lot of technical knowledge and they stay, and while they are at our school, they will do in this way, so the technical field.
Okay, first challenge, human resources. The students had to create an advertisement for their dream job. Their solutions included a flyer, poster, a video that they could show on social media, and covering letter. They were thinking about job possibilities, their dream job, and their own capabilities and characteristics. Advertising. Next, they worked on advertising. The companies are aware that they don't know all the channels they can use for their advertisements in order to reach the young people today. They want to make their advertisement more attractive for young people. Through the challenges, it became obvious that young people know very well what they want. Short messages, hashtags, QR codes, videos. Technology is an extension of them, and it represents a tool without which they can no longer exist. Technological challenge. Here you can see some of the technological solutions that students have prepared in various programs they use at school, for example, Logosoft. Some solutions were made using PowerPoint, which the students know well. By the way, even the video was made in PowerPoint.
Remote control of technology. Technological challenges were a different story altogether. First of all, there was a big obstacle because during the pandemic, the students couldn't be present at school. That was a big problem for them, how to reach the hardware, how to connect the hardware, how to manipulate with hardware. The teacher set up cameras. The teacher set up equipment, and that enables students to work through the distance, so over the internet. The students have to solve the problem. And as you can see here is camera that was live streaming, so all the time. Here is microcontroller connected with all the necessary equipment, and also the modem that was connected over mobile internet. And the students connected to the mobile modem and then push the software into the controller, and over the camera they were checking the results. So they prepared input and over the camera checking the output. That was the only solution from our point of view that was possible during the pandemic time. And when we are talking about the challenges, here you can see a schematic of the circuit, which was set up at school. So they prepare the circuit, they prepare everything, push it to the equipment, and then after testing, the final solution was prepared. This is only one of the examples that they were doing on it, so they were preparing the final solution. And when we are talking about the results, 172 attending students, 7 companies that I mentioned before, 14 challenges that were given by the companies, 14 mentors from our school and from the companies, 90 minutes of presentations, and at the end, 25 meetings. When we're talking about 25 meetings, this is at least 25 meetings, but you have to know the time was limited, so only 5 weeks for the final solution was given to them. While we were doing everything, also the logo was prepared, and this is the final result, so the project logo that was created from the students.
Let's look at the achievements. The whole project was time well spent, both for students and for the mentors. Searching for the solutions and the future job opportunity both represented additional motivation for the students. Introducing new solutions to companies and other participants gave students the chance to practice the skill of public speaking and presenting. Students gained a lot of additional knowledge by exploring various topics that they found interesting. The media. The project attracted a lot of attention. Above all, it gave the participant a chance to stay connected, to keep the team spirit alive, and to develop their creativity. The principal, Ms. Darinka Martinčič-Zalokar, was declared Ime tedna, the name of the week on Val 202, which is one of our national radio stations. The biggest national daily newspapers, Delo and Dnevnik, wrote about the project. We were on television, on the TV show Preverjeno, and on Radio 94 radio station. The students were very proud. And the students, as I said, pride, self-confidence, developing various competences, following the current needs of the economy, and participating in various projects are just a few of the skills the students developed and improved.
Okay, so what will be the learning environments of the future?
During our project, we noticed that the digital tools helped us to be more efficient as mentors, people who lead students through their own development.
We encouraged critical thinking by solving different problems. The students try to find their solution by experimenting and looking for information. So they were using various tools.
The project still continues and is even spreading to primary schools.
This year, we don't have only one school participating. We've got 3 different schools on this project.
The distance won't be a problem, since we will cooperate together using various digital resources that we have at our disposal today.
Thank you for your listening. If you got any further questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for this great presentation. I think that it was a natural continuation of what was Dr. Redford also explaining on integrating digital competencies in various ways. My first questions will be, before I give the questions to the floor, how did you adjust the organization, the methods, and so on? Were there any stressful moments for the teachers? Were they very motivated also, like students, or were there any problems?
Yes, it was very stressful. We worked lately at night because we had to cooperate with them, and
the students and the mentors were working during the weekend. So honestly, Saturday, Sunday, evenings, meetings were mostly in the evening hours. So 7, 8, 9 p.m. That was the only possible way, because in the morning hours, there was regular study time, so school time. And that was the only way how to manage with the project. And of course, the pressure was high, the time was very short. And the idea was to finish with the real solution and to show those companies that we can show them and prepare the final solution that is working in the real environment, not just to do something.
Yes, yes, I suppose that will be your answer. Yes, thank you. So any other questions? Okay, here.
Grazio from Malta. Just 2 questions. First of all, how did you incentivize companies to offer their help and support to schools and to students to give their time and effort for this project? And secondly, was this on a voluntary basis for students to apply? Because even in Malta, for example, when you have this similar kind of projects, usually you attract the same interested students. And the challenge is to attract those students who usually lag behind, are more passive, perhaps they don't care that much in school matters and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. We are cooperating with about 800 companies in Ljubljana or near Ljubljana because of this practical side of education. So the students are going to the companies, and this is where we've got many connections. We ask companies to cooperate with this project because we are cooperating all the time in different areas, and they replied immediately. And they offered us mentors because they know, they aware that we need something that is communicating from the company with school and back. And this is the answer how we get them. So they were prepared and they were also interested in this solution, because they also see the final, so for them, this is opportunity to get the students after they finish the school. And during this process, this whole part, they can notice which students are really great. Which are the best one, which are on the time, which are students with the higher level of knowledge and they are prepared to learn. So the companies see the opportunity in this way. Maybe for the first part and the second part.
And the students feel very well when they felt team spirit. Yeah, that was very important to them.
On the slide, you can see some notes that were, so on one of the PowerPoints at the end, you can notice some texts, short messages. Our colleague Meta Jurca just received those messages from the students that they're really aware that they would like to join to this group to do on these projects, and they don't have anything to do. Okay, they've got school time and everything, but beside that, there is nothing they can show the knowledge, their opportunities to work on something. And those notes are just thanks for everything that happened during the projects, just to feel what was happening. It was not just something they have to do, it was something they wanted to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your answers and your questions. We don't have time, unfortunately. Can we take another question? No? Okay. So I'll suggest that we continue with presentations and maybe ask something our colleagues in the coffee break or lunch break or something like that, if there will be a possibility. Thank you for the presentation. And now, I invite Maria Blažić from primary school Dobje to the floor. She's just, yes, 1 minute. She was sitting over there. So, her presentation will be in English, but there was some misunderstanding, so the slides will be in Slovene. So I'm sorry. I will say that this can be another challenge of this conference. You can use your Google Translate or other software and try to translate slides with your phone or tablet. Yes. Discussions and the questions later, of course, everything will be in English. Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Maria Blažić, teacher of mathematics. Sorry. Of the Dobje Primary School. My teacher guideline is to create a condition where students will feel safe and fulfilled, where the students forms an independent personality who will be able to acquire and seek new knowledge, raising a healthy, calm, cultured, and satisfied adolescent. I'm aware that the education system has a key role to play in this, as it educated people from an early age. Together with other colleagues, we are building a school without stress, without violence, fear, and school in which teachers and students feel satisfied and improved after class. As a school, we share common values, key factors that influence what people do, how we do, and how we feel about it. The school participates in many international projects. Teachers are constantly educating themselves, even from each other. We are interdisciplinary. We build on the foundation that emphasizes the development of transversal skills, which are important for the development of the individual, his creativity, intelligence, and learning abilities. The development of STEM competition with elements of formative monitoring using digital tools ensures the comprehensive development on the students. New times, new requirements for teaching children that will give them useful knowledge. Students become responsible for their own knowledge. Why do we even need this knowledge? They know how to plan their work, set goals, and evaluate them. The role of teacher is changing, encouraging, directing, and giving effective feedback. Knowledge is a value and it must also remain. It's necessary to create a climate. It's necessary to create a climate among students that will provide students with an environment in which they feel safe and so their creativity and curiosity can be expressed. With students' involvement and assignment, the student is informed that he important part in the process and we take the role and responsibility for his action and the success and failure of the group. He realizes that his work is important and unique for the group. We give to the group and we get even more from them, from it. So the students become responsible for their own knowledge. They know how to critically evaluate work and give in constructive criticism. Students become responsible for their knowledge. The role of the teacher is decisive. Not only with the word, it is necessary to use different methods and forms of work so that students themselves learn the importance of knowledge and respect for others. It's necessary. A little more information, informal forms are give a special charm, such as interesting activities, where we hang out with students from 1st to 9th grade. We learn elsewhere, smaller than larger, and vice versa. Students want to know, they do not transcribe. Students become each other's source of teaching. In such activities, we participate in competition, create, equip the classroom. These activities connect students. Okay. We participate in competition, contents, organize events, excursions. Okay. The result, however, show excellence in competition for a school with just over 100 students. Okay. The basic digital tool we use for of365, it offers the teacher and the student many opportunities to follow the lessons and gather evidence. Okay. In math, the OneNote class notebook has become a tool for us on how to effectively following the steps of formative monitoring. There are quite a few programs in the cloud which we can create and also store our work. There is also a space for exchanging options, and online notebook is available to everyone at home and at school. The students has a detailed overview of what is happening in class and homework. However, the notebook also makes certain content not visible to everyone. We load the study material into the notebook, collect evidence. The notebook allows the insert of images and animation, connections, mathematical equations. We can write in it for free. In fact, it's a substitute for a student's notebook. Okay. Individual parts of the notebook, they write down all the steps of formative monitoring. In the e-portfolio, in the tab of My Learning, prior knowledge, goals and criteria, strategies, evidence, self-evaluation, and achieved goals. Students identify prior knowledge, photograph the evidence and attach into a notebook. Pupils themselves set goals and criteria for the topics covered. which serves as a basis for them to put together a task in pairs, which is later solved by classmates. Also write a criteria. Next. Next. When composing tasks, we start from the applicability of knowledge. We look for the live exams and are close to the students. Next. In solving the task of research, they write down all the stage in a notebook, attach evidence, photographs. They then evaluate the task according to the criteria and also give written feedback on the knowledge of classmates. The criticism were very constructive, the delivery was correct, they focused on the good and also what else can be improved. The students are very satisfied with the way they work. Criticism may have been a little harder to accept at times, but they soon found that it couldn't get any better without it. Others see differently. Next. Students also comment on how the task is composed. Feedback, comments. Next. Some evaluation and that also write something of themselves, write themselves. Next. Also, teaching is next. Also, criticism and next. Teaching is a process that is constantly changing. Changes in society also require changes in the education system. Teachers need to be sensitive to what is happening, and we need to enable students to be able to meet the challenges of modern times. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have now time for some questions. As you can see, we made a transitions from university students to secondary students and now to pupils in primary schools. And this is maybe a group that was the most challenging to use digital tools and virtual environments and so on. So I'm sure that there are questions for, please stay here for a moment. Are there any questions now from the floor? Here, students. We now have another microphone, so I can stay here.
Thank you for your presentation. So I would like to ask whether you think that students grading themselves or each other is as fair or even more fair than teachers grading students, because students can take into consideration the amount of work others put in, but another thing to think about is the personal relations between students, so they could overgrade them because they're friends. Torej, če je enako pravično, da dijaki oziroma učenci ocenjujejo sami sebe ali druge, če vzamemo ja, če v redu.
Ja, zelo kritično se ocenijo, realno ocenijo. Zelo realno se ocenijo, zato ker nismo imeli nekih, mogoče celo včasih bolj kritično kot učitelj. Izkazalo se je zelo dobro to in tudi sodelovanje se je izboljšalo. Tudi tistih učencev, ki ne sodelujejo, so ob takem načinu dela začeli delati in dejansko kritično ocenili sami sebe, mogoče včasih še bolj kot učitelj. Dejansko nobenih problemov ni.
Okay, Maria, I will just shortly translate this. Maria told us that they were maybe even more strict pupils than teachers would be. They were more cooperative. So while doing this, the cooperation was building up. So it was one of the positive things that was a side effect of this peer assessments that they implemented. Maybe one more questions before we begin, before we continue. Maybe from the virtual platform, Confiva. Okay, no. Okay, thanks. So then, thank you, Maria, again,
Thank you.
and sorry for the complications that we caused you. Yeah. So then I would like to invite Katja Kraj and Björn Rudzewitz from University of Tübingen. So you have a possibility to have a microphone on. If you need it, please come here. Okay. So let's take our microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. So hello, everybody. Thanks for having us here. And if it is okay for you, we would like to take off our masks. So that's us.
Yes, and we talk about our work on learning analytics in the context of intelligent language tutoring systems and how to integrate this into the classroom. So let's start. Sorry, this jumped one slide ahead. So let's start by asking what is learning analytics in the first place. So learning analytics, this is the definition that you can read, is the measurement, collection, and analysis and reporting of data about learners and their context, with the purpose of understanding and optimizing learning and the environments in which it occurs. And we can ask then, how can this be applied? Well, I see two strands for the application. One is to inform humans better about learning, and the other one is to inform digital tools better about the learning. And we will talk about both of those strands today. So informing humans works by taking the data and presenting it in some way. So visualizations or dashboards or open learner models can do that. And for the second part, for the adaptation of digital tools, we can do two types of adaptivity. The first one is called micro-adaptivity, and this is basically direct feedback. So while you are working on a task, you already get feedback on that. And the second one, which we also heard in a previous talk today, is called macro-adaptivity. So this means adapting a sequence of activities to individual learners. So it's the same end goal, but the learning paths towards there are different. To be able to do something like that, we need to get data, because learning analytics is data-driven and we need to get some data. Where can we get them from? Ideally from authentic contexts, and intelligent tutoring systems come into play here. Because intelligent tutoring systems, they offer some benefits that make them desirable to be used in real-life teaching and learning. The first benefit would be that, as I said, there's feedback while you're working on a task. And so as a student, you can already get some feedback and improve your answers while you're working on a task. As a teacher, because of this feedback, you need to correct less, because the computer can already provide some assistance and do some correction for you. And this basically reduces the workload of teachers. And a good benefit from this is that while the teachers and students are working on a system, this generates data points, and we can use those data points to do learning analytics. So let's make this concrete. This is what we did. So we went from a printed school book here to a web platform, the so-called Feedbook, where we put the exercises from here into the web app and offered this direct feedback there. Here's an example of to illustrate why we are doing this. This is a scan of an actual learner answer from the printed workbook. And the task here is to combine those two sentences and to practice conditional clauses. The student wrote, if she listened more to Jillian, she feels better. The problem here is that without feedback, the student might not even be aware of the fact that there are problems in the answer and also does not know how to correct them. So if we take this exercise and then look at it in the digital version, this is exactly the same exercise, but in the feedbook. And you can see that's also the same answer that the student typed. But now we get immediate feedback. So with conditional clauses type 2, we use the simple past and the if clause, not the simple present. So this is the additional benefit I was talking about, micro-adaptivity, that such systems can offer. And why do we provide this kind of feedback? What's the role of feedback? So it has been shown in many studies that feedback is one of the most effective factors when it comes to learning gains. The problem is that in a regular classroom, typically the teacher is the only reliable source of who can provide feedback. So the student population is very heterogeneous. Everyone has a different background. So the problem is that as a teacher, I cannot give direct feedback to everyone while they're working on the task. But if you work on a tutoring system, then the tutoring system can provide this feedback to everyone at the same time. And this is how the tutoring systems can come in here. Here's another example from the feedbook. This is a exercise where you're supposed to practice the formation of simple past forms. And you can see that for the answers that have been given that are correct, a student can immediately see with the screen check mark that the answer is correct. Now, if you put in something like here, try it, and you hit enter, then we can see on the next slide. We can see on the next slide that the system detects that there's a problem in saying that if an infinitive ends in consonant plus y, you change the y to I in the simple past. So the student then can correct this in the next step. So note that the system does not give the target answer, but the student is given a hint on how to correct the answer to arrive at the correct solution. Let's look at another exercise. This is a reading comprehension exercise. So you can see the other one was very closed. This is a little bit more open, this exercise. And here you're supposed to read the text and then answer those questions. The first one is, what does this person know about the writer of the card? So if the student writes something like, it is a Valentine's card, which does not answer the question, the system detects that there's a problem with the meaning and says there's important information missing. Plus, it also highlights the part of the text where this information can be found so that I know, okay, I should read up on those parts here. We can see here, so meaning feedback and then form feedback or grammar feedback, what we saw in the beginning. And here we can see a combination. This is called incidental focus on form. And the person here wrote, the writer was a girl. And the system then says, this is the simple past, so you need to use the simple present here. And says, this refers to this part of was here. So you can see that once the meaning is correct, the system then focuses on grammar. And this is called incidental focus on form. You can see a combination of two feedback strategies here. So then the correct answer, you can write something like, the writer is a girl, or on the next slide, we can see, it is a girl who sent a card, or on the next slide, the writer who sent the card is a girl. So you can see it does not work on string matching, on surface matching, but there's a short answer assessment component behind this that evaluates the meaning and not only the form of the learner answers. So now we can see where the type of data that we're working with comes from. And we can use the same data, but use it in different ways for different target groups. We can see one example on the next slide where such kind of log data that it gets generated can be used to inform students better about the learning. Here is a screenshot from the Open Learner model in Feedbook, where you can see there are broad categories like future tense, past tense, present tense, and below that a spiderweb chart with green and red bars. And green means that you have used this construct correctly. So each edge here is a construct, and red means you used it incorrectly. And if there's no evidence, you can see there's no bar here. So you can immediately see what have I practiced already, where are problems and where are gaps. So let's look at informing teachers better about learning. Let's say we have an exercise here with 3 items, and I give this as a homework assignment to my students. Then instead of having to go through all the answers that the students provided, which I typically do when I do it on paper, I can also view an aggregated view here in the system. So this is a summary of what the learners did and what the system provided as feedback. I can see here in the pie chart, each slice is representing one feedback message. And the biggest one here says we are talking about something that was happening in the past at the same time as something else. An expression like while shows that this was happening for a longer time, so we used the past progressive. So knowing this as a teacher, I can go into my next class, and then I know that the students have problems with knowing that while is a signal word for the past progressive, and I can use that to prepare my next lesson. Finally, here is a view that you can also, it's also a screenshot from the system where you can see how many people worked on an exercise and were they successful in the end. So we can see on the x-axis, we see how many times people tried on an exercise, and on the y-axis, like how many people then actually submitted something. And red means that the exercise was submitted, but there was still some errors. So as a teacher, I still have to go over it and correct it. And green means that this was a fully correct, so everything was answered correctly. And as a teacher, I don't need to invest work in it. We can see that this is actually a good exercise because the green line here is most of the time above the red line, which means that the probability of like investing time and effort more often leads to a fully correct exercise than an exercise where I still have to put in effort. And of course, there are other exercises. We can analyze this for every exercise. So very briefly, for macro adaptivity, currently we're working on and evaluating a system that goes one step beyond that and provides adaptive sequencing. So it means the learning goals are the same for everyone, but the paths, the exercise sequences there can differ and are adapted to individual students. In order to do that, we need to model the domain. So what should be learned, activities, what is offered in an exercise, what can you practice in an exercise, what are the prerequisites, and the learners. We already saw how learners are modeled. And then a pedagogical module comes in that implements some pedagogical principles. For example, that closed activities are sequenced before open activities, that you have like learning phases so that you zoom in on a construct and then you start from easy to hard on that construct. And this of course leads to differences in the learning sequences, which means if you are faster, if you are better at this topic, then you progress faster than students who need more remedial work to reach the goals. And concretely, it looks like that in our system, that you can assign a topic, for example, tenses and simple past, that you can monitor the progress of students on this topic, but the concrete exercise sequences are decided based on the learner model and the pedagogical module and the domain module. And with that, I hand over to my colleague, Katja Krei.
Thanks, Björn. Exactly. I would like to have a closer look at some of the points Björn just mentioned, and I would also like to add some new aspects from the teacher perspective. I'm somebody who did not only help develop the system, but I'm also a real teacher in high school, and I implemented the system. Oh, sorry. Thanks. Here we go. I need one. To go one, yes, exactly. I would like to start by saying something about the educational setup. Of course, the necessary infrastructure needs to be provided in school and at home. I do not want to give you any details on that, but I want to point out that it is not only infrastructure that is of importance, but it is also important that students are trained in self-regulation. If that is not the case, then the whole system does not work. Now, and how is the system, the I-call system feedback implemented in the class during the course of a unit lesson? Step number one, and this is an absolute prerequisite, is that a new grammar topic needs to be introduced. Of course, this can be introduced in class, or it can be introduced in a flipped classroom session by using like some explainer video. And then on this seeding soil, it is our I-call system that can be used either as homework or distance education or actually in class. And it is really important for us to point out that we don't want English teaching or foreign language teaching to stop at this point with these kill and drill exercises, as they are called. But we want to move on, and we want students to apply what they've actually learned in target tasks. We heard about that in one of the talks. That is really important to use complex, higher order thinking, authentic tasks where communication and collaboration is really important. So having said that about the educational setup, it is quite obvious that this is an immense impact on the teacher, because I have a complete new role. It is not me who actually designs the tasks, who assigns the tasks, who monitors what the students are doing. Instead, it is a system somehow that, you know, assigns all these tasks and the things. And so and also it was in one of the other talks. The role changes from teacher to a more like a mentor or something, or monitor, yeah, to a mentor. And so, and also what I felt is that, you know, there was this huge amount of data being thrown at me, and I had to learn how to read all the data, right? And I had to understand, okay, kind of nice to know the proficiency of individual learners, of all learners, how they got there and how long it took them and so on and so forth. But then my work actually started to draw the conclusions and, you know, decide on how to guide the individuals and what to do next in class, right? And also the role of the student somehow changed. We talked about a little bit, we touched upon the fact that it is self-paced and self-regulated learning, and but they are not, of course, left out alone, left in the lurch, but we guided them on the side. And so students actually, they reported back that they really were able to swim in a flow channel. Now, what does that mean? That means that due to the system assigning the tasks on each individual level, they were able to develop in the zone of proximal development. That means the tasks were neither too easy nor too difficult, and they could study on their level. And one nice benefit is, or a side effect is actually, this all comes independent of social background. And we heard this also in a talk this morning, that some parents needed digital skills in order to support their students at home. This is not necessary, and neither is to be able to afford expensive tutoring. And let's have a closer look at the stakeholders as well. Researchers are happy that they gain all this data from a real authentic context. And then also material designers, you know, based on this, the analysis and interpretation of the data, material designers have to rethink how to actually design textbooks. Now, because we know which tasks work and which sequencing works and what kind of scaffolding students need. And also it will have hopefully a huge impact on curriculum designers. For example, up to this present moment, it was only based on experience to decide on, you know, when students are cognitively able to, let's say, learn the if clauses or whatsoever. But now, based on this data, that might be shuffled around. Also, educational advisors, we have to rethink about, for example, assessment centers or school types. In Germany, for example, we have 3 different school types. Maybe we only need 1. And last but not least, teachers and educators have to rethink their didactical, pedagogical concepts and how we actually teach. So took me longer than I thought. I'm sorry for that, but let's put it in a nutshell. We believe it's a win-win situation for everybody. Teachers are not overburdened any longer with task design in heterogeneous classes. They have more time for the real stuff, for complex tasks in class. And students, because they are better prepared for actually complex tasks in the classroom, and also stakeholders, because important political and pedagogical decisions can now be actually based on scientific data. So much for today. Thank you very much for listening. And now we are more than happy to take some of your questions.
Thank you very much for your presentations. I'm very happy that you pointed out that to make distance learning and different digital learning environments successful, students must have self-regulated learning skills. One of the key competencies for lifelong learning, but important to acknowledge this. Now, any questions? Okay, I will give the gentleman here.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Grazie from Malta. We completely agree with what you have presented and everything. Our question is was the software developed commercially, in the sense that educators have to procure it, buy it? I'm asking this because in Malta we are trying to digitize education, to have digital software. The challenges that we're finding is, first of all, you have to have a pool of developers to develop these kind of software. If not, you have to buy off-the-shelf software. Secondly, if you're going to try to develop this kind of software, then there are the intellectual property of the textbooks, which obviously you have to respect and you cannot copy. And then there are a whole legal issues and so on and so forth. Third, this kind of software costs a lot, because you have, when you buy a book in Malta, usually the public schools, you collect at the end of the year and then you give it to other students next year. So in that case, you might save some money. When it comes to software, you have to pay a license per user per year, so it will cost much more. And another issue is that you cannot give direct contracts to software developers and companies because of public procurement regulations and EU regulations, where you have to open up for competitiveness and so on. So then we'll end up of changing software every 2 or 3 years. So when teachers start getting used to the software, because the uptake of software is very slow for teachers and so on, when they start getting used to it, then you're going to stop it and perhaps introduce new software. So we are finding this digitization very, very challenging. Perhaps you have researched about it or have some solutions for this. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Very important points. So first of all, the software is non-commercial. It's only used for research. It's also possible to sign up there. In the new version, you can even create an account by yourself. We always get messages of teachers registering there. About intellectual property, in this first version of the original feedbook, we had a cooperation partner with the schoolbook publisher. And for the purpose of this project, they allowed us to integrate the exercises into it, but only for research purposes, not for commercial purposes. And in the second version, in this adaptive sequencing, we have now developed our own materials. So we moved away from the publisher because we need more variance in the exercises. So if you want to do adaptivity, you need to systematically like tweak the parameters, make it a little bit more harder, more difficult, more open, more closed. You need many variants of an exercise, which typically is not provided by a traditional publisher. This is why teachers like Katja and our colleagues developed our own materials there.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to ask if the feedback could be used for learning languages in general, for example, for exchange students or maybe for even other countries?
Yes, it's a great question. So the what we have developed is for English, but the methods could be applied to other languages as well. Like what you need to do is you need to first start off by observing what students actually do, because like students, in our case, 7th grade students, they don't produce all kinds of errors, but they produce something that like reflects their current level where they are. Like in 7th grade, you learn certain constructs and then you make certain errors about them. I would say if you want to adapt it for other languages, you would collect some textbooks like we did, analyze them and ask teachers, what kind of feedback would you give to the students, so that we as developers can then write rules that target the misconceptions that the students have and the type of feedback that the teacher would give. And I think that would be the process of adapting it.
Okay, yeah. Hello, my name is Sanna Oines and I'll come from University of Helsinki from the Center for Educational Assessment. And thank you for your very inspiring presentation. I think you have developed a really nice platform. I'm curious, since we are trying to, and we actually do have some kind of the similar computer-based assessment tasks as you have. And we also do the research based on the log data as well. And I was thinking that while you study that, or in your online platform, students are learning quite specific grammatical skills. So I was thinking that, have you already studied whether these skills they learn, I think, pretty fast in online? Have you already studied whether they are transferred to when they have tasks in paper-based context without this feedback, which I think that gives hints and directs their decisions in online, whether these skills do transfer? Have you?
Yeah, so we did a randomized controlled field trial for 1 school year to evaluate the effectiveness of feedback. So we kind of had 4 topics, and we switched control and intervention for each topic so that everyone gets the intervention at one point. And so the experiment tested whether this direct feedback, how this relates to delayed feedback by the teacher. And we found out that the students who, like over 1 school year, the students who got this direct feedback in a pre-post test design for each topic, they on average had 62% better results in the post test than those with the delayed feedback. So we think that we have shown that this is highly effective. We also wanted to evaluate it against like work on paper, but like the control on paper, they dropped out because they didn't see the point of just logging in and doing a pre and post test, but not benefiting from the system. So one thing to consider, of course, is things like novelty effects, that when you get a new tool, then you're motivated to work with it, and that could also make it difficult to compare it on paper, but it's something that we had wanted but have no like empirical evidence at the moment for.
Okay. Thank you very much. Katja didn't have the microphone, but I suppose that you understood her reaction. Just one moment. We will. There is one question at the Confiva from Ivana Juraga. So she asked, Katja mentioned that it's also a win for researchers as they get access to real data. In connection to that, have you come across concerns from students or parents about their data being collected? So are there any concerns about data collection? As a teacher, do you feel well equipped and supported to make decisions regarding such concerns? So it's the problem of the data collection, yeah, one maybe important problem in learning analytics.
Yeah, it absolutely is a challenging issue we have to tackle somehow. I don't know. I know that other countries. No, okay. Let me start out by there was this one presentation in which I was impressed by the list of tools being used, like Google Classroom and things like that. And I was whoa, that would have never been possible in a German classroom, because really, let's say we are really obsessed with data protection and stuff like that. So. Actually, yes, parents are concerned. We have to put a lot of work into, you know, explaining where we are coming from and what we are doing. And as soon as we mentioned that our server is at the University of Tübingen, and that neither Apple nor Google nor one of the other big players have access to our platform, and that we are not, you know, I'm a civil servant. I'm not allowed to sell anything to any, you know, commercial whatever. Then most of the parents are actually happy with that, and they agree to take part in a program like that. And the leftovers, they get a special arrangement, so they use the platform, but we guarantee that we don't use their data. So because we don't want to have, let's say, second-class citizens in the classroom. So they participate as all other students, but we don't use their data.
Okay. Hello, so thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. Representing Lithuanian Education Ministry, Vilma Ferrari. In one of the pre-last slides, you showed that instead of giving the next task by the teacher, the system provides a suggestion what he can learn, what he can exercise. So what is my question is, could you explain a bit more? What is the logic or the algorithm behind that? Because this is quite challenging.
A very decisive question. Okay.
Yes, but it's a great question, and I think that there's not too much research on that, so we have to explore a lot ourselves. And like I'm developing, but I'm always talking to teachers, because we need to implement their insights into the design of the adaptive algorithm. So what I can say how it works is it has 4 components: a domain model, which models kind of the things that you should learn, a very detailed manner on, like in a hierarchical model about language use and morphology and syntax, and then many sub-constructs like comparatives, then regular, irregular, and so on. So first you model what should be learned. Then the second component is a activity model that very precisely for each, even on the level of items, says this is what needs to be produced here, and this is what also occurs, so like target versus core material, and these are the prerequisites. So I need to have learned this or that before I can like meaningfully do this exercise. And the third component is the learner model that records what have I already done, how well have I done it, where are gaps, and what are common misconceptions that I have over time, like tracking it longitudinally over time. And then the final component, the fourth component, is the pedagogical module. This is basically I would say, AI-based implementation, where we implemented pedagogical constraints on how the algorithm should behave. So it, as I said, it has learning phases, it implements learning phases where you, for each construct, zoom into a construct and then start with easier, and then step by step go to harder exercises, so that you start with, for example, interactive exercises in the beginning where you need to like just move elements, and then later you go to production where you have to type, and then we go from like one word to two sentences, essentially, in there. There are other considerations in there. For example, looking at the learning goals, that you always need to put in a learning goal, what should be learned. And then basically the algorithm uses those constraints, searches the space of exercises, and then finds the smallest distance between the learning goals, the activities, and the learner model. So in essence, I would say you can view it as a vector distance-based approach. It tries to minimize the distance between all those 3 dimensions, I would say.
Hi, my name is Michal Rimer. I'm from Slovakia, from the Ministry of Education. And you mentioned that the self-regulation is a prerequisite for using this tool. Could you tell us a bit more about whether you prepare the students for self-regulations? What did you do, or could you just elaborate on this condition, please? Thank you.
Yeah, self-regulation, means that you have to set your own goals and find your own paths and constantly monitor what you are doing and work together with other students and things like that. And we found, I don't know about teaching in your country, but usually there are, of course, different models in Germany too. Like, in some classrooms, the teaching is really task-based oriented, so that you can explore and stuff like that. But in other lessons, it's just the teacher who does all the talking, and the students don't do anything, don't have to organize and monitor, are not responsible for what they are doing. And actually, so in my school, what we did is we started changing the setup of the whole school. Well, we changed like the classrooms looked like and things like that. And we gave them, we said, okay, we want to do a lot of task-based learning. And we also want to, we changed this, we changed the way the school day is structured. Is not like 60 minutes of English and then 60 minutes of maths and what's so on. And here are different tasks they have to explore. And of course, students have to learn how to get organized and how to, actually go outside of the classroom and start, with their work and stuff like that. So we have a close mentoring program. Each teacher is responsible for only a handful of students, and then on this basis, I can decide if, for example, this student is already ready to leave the classroom and do the tasks outside of the classroom, or if the student is even ready to stay at home completely and do the tasks online and what have you. And this is so they get badges of being a proficient self-regulated learner or a beginner, and depending on this badge they receive, they have freedoms they can take advantage of. But this is not a static system. You have to guide them, you have to give them feedback, and then train them in self-regulation. That's only a short glimpse. It's a huge question and an ongoing process for all of us, actually.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay, one more question, and then we'll go to the next session. As you can imagine, our session is prolonged a bit, so it will not finish at 1 and 10 minutes. Yes, so you just be patient and stay a little more here with us. So yes, 1 minute.
Hello, I'm sorry if I changed the subject, but I was very interested in what you just said about the change that is happening in your school. Could you briefly describe it? When did it happen, and why and how? Whether is it an initiative of the headmaster or the teachers? Could you just briefly describe it?
I'm afraid briefly it's not possible, but I try as best as I can, actually. Okay, but let me go back to the year 2013. this is when some iPads were thrown into our classrooms, into our, well, let's say conservative classrooms and teaching environment. And we figured that this does not work. This simply does not work. We have to change how we teach, and then we started changing the way we teach and give more responsibility to the students. And then we found out, hold on a second, how can we give students more responsibility? If they are sitting like 30 students crammed in the classroom right in front of us, we have to change the way the school is built, actually, or is decorated, or what have you. And the way we did it was, I'm still to this day, I'm very thankful to our headmaster and now our headmistress, who said, she said, okay, everybody who's willing to participate in this process gets some free time actually to do this, to start developing it. And we started out with only, we are a big school. I don't know, we have about 800, not that big, but 800 students. And they said, okay, take 100 of our students and start doing it. But what you need to do is you constantly need to report back to all the other staff members. And what was very helpful was that we also implemented, so there were about 20 teachers who were willing to participate in this process. And what was extremely effectful and helpful and was that we implemented something that we called professional learning communities. So yeah, you are nodding your heads, right? So we actually developed lessons together. We tried them and then reflected on them, and we met on every other week to talk about our students and also to talk about what we actually experienced in the classroom. And so this process happened in this process has started in 2013. It's an ongoing process, but it is only it was only last year actually, during Corona times, that it is sort of mandatory, obligatory for all of us it is complete. We have a new pedagogical concept for the whole school. And when I'm talking about the whole school, I'm not only talking about teachers, I'm talking about the students, I'm talking about parents, everybody who participates in the system. But we are far from being perfect. It's still a long way to go, but at least we're trying.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again, Katja and Björn. I hope you will try even further, and so we will. So thanks. We will now go to the next presentation. Thanks. Thank you. So the last presentation is from our students. They will have a short presentation. They will introduce themselves, and I invite you here to the floor and take the microphone and presentation. Yes.
Greetings and welcome everybody here today, both physically and virtually. We are the representatives of the Students' Voice. My name is Nera. I'm in my 4th and last year of Upper Secondary School of Electric and Computer Engineering and Technical Gymnasium in Ljubljana. And these are my colleagues.
I'm Gregor Griltz. I go to France Prešeren Secondary School. Oh, is it not working? Is it working? Okay. And yeah, I live in Kran.
Hello, I am Živa Žanet Kramberger, and I'm coming from Secondary School of Economics and Gymnasium in Maribor.
Hi, I'm Laura Vembic, and I come from Secondary School in Izjava for preschool education?
Hi, I'm Zala, and I'm currently in the 3rd year of Kamnik Grammar School.
Hello, I am Lan Cvek, and I go to the 3rd year of Grammar School Center in Celje.
As you may notice, we're all from a very variety of educational institutions. So the digital age. Yes, the digital age is integrating into all parts of our lives, and education is definitely the one that affects us and our future the most. And growing up as a part of this generation, as our generation, sort of means that we are the natives of the smart technology era. And statistically speaking, the society is climbing this educational ladder, since newer generations are always more likely to pursue college than their predecessors. And while this sounds very promising, being immersed with technology from such a young age could have its advantages and shortcomings as well. And this being an advantage or a disadvantage depends on how children, teenagers, and young adults are taught this knowledge, of course. And as we were discussing and preparing for today, we concluded what we thought is the most important. We are looking forward to what digitization brings to education, but we do not want education to become just one big database. We wish to learn with the advantage of better simulating what we cannot come to physical touch with, and to discover more ways to expand our long-term memory. All of this should be achieved in a way available to everyone and in reach of all who yearn for knowledge. So what most educational workers, educators consider an issue is finding the right mix between traditional and digitally enhanced teaching methods. So the IT development, of course, is progressing really fast, but the integration might seem slow in certain countries. So one of the things most students probably wish to see and are probably looking forward to the most is the digitization and virtualization of the learning environment, meaning the educational institutions, classrooms, etc. So that's where we spend our time the most. Depending on how educational institutions infiltrate more screen time, it does not necessarily have to have a bad influence, of course. And it might even help develop certain motor skills. Instead of spending most classes writing down theoretical parts of our subjects, a lot of valuable time could be used to paying attention to the explanation itself. Many sciences research today stand in need, actually, of very hard requirable examples to be understood better. And at least partly virtualizing this explanation could inspire so many future scientists. So one of the ideas we had during our discussions is the vital need for a platform that has it all. And while some of the platforms are already attempting to do this with schedules and communication and other things, we also need learning materials which are way more accessible, maybe some artificial intelligence that aids students at any time. And involving such a platform would make progress more trackable, would also enable recording content for later use, and the whole internet of resources, which would let them learn and solve problems more independently. We all agreed that this is something that should be free, available to even people who have no access to educational institutions, and that many students who wish to travel while pursuing their education would need such a platform, which is globally connected and could help those choose schools in other countries and maybe even learn the language. As all branches of industry are also getting more digitally enhanced, using all of this technology through basic education would prepare the workforce for using technology in their workspace.
As we mentioned, the most noticeable change with the rise of the digitalization will be in the learning environment. Students nowadays are taught in such a way that they see the problem and they have to try to find the solution. But nowadays, with the modern technologies, sometimes they should be able to create the solution themselves, because that's just how life works sometimes. It is essential to mention the virtual learning environment, considering the past 2 years. It made us realize just how much IT knowledge we lacked, students as well as teachers. That's why we believe that people in the future should have more IT knowledge, even on a lower educational level. IT knowledge is not important just for education, but for life as well. Global networking is essential for modern day business, education, as well as all other relations. So yes, students nowadays should be able to realize the difference between problem-based learning and challenge-based learning, and to recognize when using each one is a better solution for a given problem. That's why we strongly support learning IT technologies in schools, because it doesn't matter to which high school you go or to which university you go, you will need technology. Technology is evolving at a rapid rate, faster than ever. So it is very important to not be afraid of the future and the technology, but to face it. So we strongly recommend, and we believe that all students should be able to at least understand technology, not be afraid of it.
So in today's day and age, there's a lot of talk about the school system we are currently in. As we all probably know, most pressure comes from the outdated grading systems our schools have been using, despite it having more negative effects to it than others. We like to tell ourselves that a grade is not the skill for our current knowledge, while our further education depends on it. This is why we are proposing an introduction of digital portfolios. With it, stress would be taken off of students' shoulders, while emphasis would be put on progress and hard work instead of current knowledge or just general well-being of students on the day of the examination. Teachers would also be able to look back on their students' work and grade them on how hard they have worked to achieve the level they're at today. With the introduction of digital portfolios, there is also no more need for campaign studying, which is in short, just cramming all of your studying into a short period of time before an examination, and it's very popular nowadays. And with it, information that students learned would be retained better and for a longer time, which is just another benefit to the students. Now, another proposition from our side, and this is a big one, is the complete abolition of our current numeric or alphabetic, depends on the country you're in, grading system that we have been using since the 19th century. Instead of that, we would like to introduce the pass or fail grading system. It would still let teachers have an insight on the students' current knowledge, or even better, teachers could grade their students based on their effort and their hard work, but it would take away the stress of students comparing themselves to others by grade. So here I should also point out the issue of grades determining whether someone can enroll into a university course or not. We really should ask ourselves why a bad grade in a science class can prevent you from studying languages or social studies and vice versa. This is why, instead of that, we would like entrance exams for universities for the specific subject someone would like to be studying. Universities could also take into consideration the digital portfolios we mentioned earlier of their candidates for the subject or subjects someone wants to take courses in, to see the efforts their candidates have made to get to where they are today. So if we combine all of these, we get a grading system that puts an emphasis on progress while taking away the stress of our current grading system, and also progresses further by making it digitized with the digital portfolios. Entrance exams for universities take away the pressure of doing well in classes we do not need in our futures. So it's a win-win situation for all.
Technology is our future in everything, including school, as we've come to realize in the past few years. Grades and attendance can easily be marked online and at the same time distributed to the students and their parents. Through different sites on the internet, we can easily step in contact with our teachers regarding any concerns or questions without a problem. And we can reach out to our classmates and other students just as easily. During our discussions and even talking to students outside of this event, we noticed how much the younger generations wish to upgrade the note-taking system. They claim it would be much easier and faster to take notes using using laptops or tablets. That can at the same time be an advantage and a disadvantage. Traditional learning methods are still favored by some, but digitizing this would make it much easier to separate the more important information from the lesson. It would also help slow writers, less organized students, and absentees. That's why we would like to present to you an idea for better and easier school and studying management for both the students and the teachers. All notebooks, workbooks, and notes could be replaced with one tablet per student. That way, we could have everything we need in one place. No more losing your notes or forgetting your books at home. Each student would have, of course, have their own each student would, of course, have their own account that they could access from home as well, so they could study the homework and organize everything in peace. If you're absent, a classmate could easily send you a copy of their notes, and the teacher could send you the worksheet they worked on in class. We could also save up on the paper and lighten up the weight on students' shoulders with how heavy our bags usually are from all the books we have to carry.
Enhancing the material we learn will probably come along with this digital revolution. Students simply lose interest in what they consider irrelevant information. That is why digital tools might help teachers make it more relevant. It might be hard for the newer generations to understand the meaning that certain discoveries and events had at the time of their appearance. Whether it is fortunate or not, students often ask themselves and their teachers, when will I need this? The truth is, we might not need it, but we all have a long way to go with choosing our career path, and such a small piece of information can change a lot. An interesting and simple solution would be teachers taking some advice from their students and coming to terms with what interests them and adding it to the program of the subject. This might be a way of motivating them by making their opinion more relevant. We compare this to oral examinations during which students have the task to present a topic they like. In such way, they are encouraged to be more independent within the comfort of their own screen, while they also learn how to differentiate real information on the internet. Nowadays, the material in the fields of ET, technology, and economics is constantly changing and has a big impact on our daily lives. All this is difficult to follow, often even more difficult to teach. Many times, because of the increased use of media and internet, students have more information on these topics than teachers. That's why we would appreciate that teachers take into account our opinions, views, and claims, as they are often overheard. The school system should be modernized along with the evolution of society. Here, I would like to point out that our newly acquired knowledge could be presented to the class through various digital tools and in many different ways using the internet. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in some schools, but it should happen more often because it would make lessons more interesting for students as for teachers. For example, if a student makes an interesting presentation or video on a topic of their choice and present it to the class as a teacher, it would certainly add variety to the lessons, and we also learn something new.
So as much as we would like to focus on the positive effects, we have to face reality as well. Digital learning environments, tools, and platforms all require a certain amount of knowledge on how to use them. This means even older generations of educational workers will have to undergo some courses which would have to be consistent with the growth of technology. Another downside is the probable loss of certain educational, long-term memory, which is usually gained with the traditional studying and teaching methods. Although this issue has its solutions, apps such as I Can Write or ABC cursive writing, these apps allow children to learn cursive on a touchscreen, which is very similar to writing with pen in notebook. Similar methods could be applied to note-taking in higher grades. This would also maybe feel a bit more comfortable than typing on a keyboard, and besides all that, a huge amount of paper would be saved. I forgot what the next part is. Oh yeah. Another example is ebooks, which cannot really replace the experience of holding physical book covers. They are safely stored on our smart devices and can be accessed from basically everywhere in the world. So the learning material is way more accessible. But what most of us consider the biggest issue is, what most of us consider the biggest issue is the screen exposure of children and people in general, which has been unfortunately growing a lot for the past few years. This heightens the risk of myopia or damaging their eyesight, but it can be somehow prevented by wearing blue light glasses or using protective glass on the screen. So despite all of its advantages and disadvantages, digitalization of education is unavoidable. We should use these advantages to the fullest and strive to lessen the shortcomings through the further evolution of technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's nice, it's refreshing to hear the other side, because we more or less agree between each other what we want to achieve in education for you, because you are the future of people of the future. I think, as you can see from the presentations, there is a progress toward those goals. Maybe not grading. We cannot promise you that grading will change in the near future, but other things are changing, and I hope that they will change more rapidly now with this digitalization across Europe and the world. Maybe one comment or questions from the audience, and then we go on and conclude this session. Are there any? Maybe okay, you must understand that we are older people, tired, we are hungry, thirsty, we need air, fresh air. So maybe just one short question from all these topics that you mentioned. What do you think that now, in Slovenia at least, is a thing that you would try to change immediately or in the next few years? In terms of course, digitalization and so on.
Probably the learning environment, considering what we mentioned about better simulating the science that have really hardly requirable examples. This would make it much easier for students to understand, at least virtualizing the explanation partly.
So the topic that was presented here several times here, and also I think that they will be also tomorrow at the conference. So thank you very much again. I will now give the floor to Amela to summarize a bit our session. You can now, I think, if there are no other questions, sit back. Thank you. So, Amela.
Dear all, we just successfully arrived at the end of the session. In the name of the program committee, thank you for your contribution. We have here on screen the visual summarize of our presentations. And if you have any comments or key thoughts or yes, of course. Maybe to add something.
I think that the presentation of the students, I would like to appreciate it more vocally because it was very well thought, and I would like to applaud you because it was very well structured, very comprehensive, and with looking at both sides, pros and cons. So I would like to stress that the last presentation would be my favorite, because it was really, really amazing, and I applaud you again.
May I add, they see each other today, first time face to face. They work 1 month together on these tasks, and they start, I think, in the end of September. First see each other through the screens.
I want to agree with my colleague from the Czech Republic. I would like to see the students, what they said, really central to our session. I think when I reflect on what's been said by the students in particular, that there are a number of key values and principles that we should draw on to influence our thinking. I think there are these key principles that are almost explicit in what they're saying. I think they're there, and I think we need to consider those carefully.
So they must stay together and work together in the future. Okay, any comments? Their teachers are also here with them. So teachers, Rok, do you have any comments? No, okay. So thank you again for your contribution, and dobar tek. Do you understand me? Bon appetit.